Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Yeah, here we go. Dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class today with us. And let me give you a phone number if you'd like to call us. We're going to be talking about education and what's wrong with it. And if you've got some suggestions on how to fix it, we'd love to hear about them. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. That's the call-in number. Patrick is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Marty Barrett is with us. Marty is an educator of more than a couple decades, and she teaches the hard sciences, biology, and at the college environment. And nurses who, or people who want to be nurses, can go through her biology classes in order to get on the path to become nurses. And so she's got a lot of experience. I've known Marty for a long time. And we're going to be talking about Education Day. Welcome, Marty.
Hi. I'm ready.
Are you ready? Okay. Marty, let me tell you.
I have a lot to say today.
We do. Let me share a story with you. As you know, Marty, you and I have known each other for a long time, since the 1970s. And our families have stayed in touch all these years, and we check up on each other, make sure everybody's okay and that kind of thing. And as you know, my family lived on a farm in rural Virginia, in the countryside of Virginia. And I was listening to a radio program, a local radio program, AM radio, back then in the 90s when I lived there. And a man called up, and I hope people don't think that I'm being stereotypical. I'm not. But this man sounded like he was black. And he sounded like probably around the same age as I. And he was calling into this local radio program, and he was saying that it was a trading program or a yard sale program or a tradio program, where if you had a washing machine, you'd call up and say, I've got a washer, a GE washer, or Whirlpool washer, and I'd like $75 for it, and describe it for about 10 seconds, and then leave your phone number. And that's what the program was for about an hour, 5 days a week. So I was listening to this, and this man called up, and he said that he had a roll of wire that he wanted to sell. He went to Radio Shack and bought this roll, and on it, it said there was a 100-foot roll. He cut off 12 feet of it, and that's all he needed, and he wanted to sell the rest. And he said, I don't know how much is on here that's left, because I cut 12 feet off it, but it says it had 100 feet on it when I bought it, and that's all I used it for, and I'd have to measure to find out how much is left. I was taken aback by listening to this, so much that I've remembered it all these years. Well, that's part of the story. Let me tell you the rest of the story. The rest of the story is that the radio station was broadcasting from a county in Virginia called Prince Edward County. And in 1959, Prince Edward County shut down all the schools.
Why did
they shut them? Well, they shut them down because the federal government said you will integrate. You will no longer have black schools and white schools. Schools where the black children attended, separate from where the white children attended, separately. And the federal government said you will integrate your schools. You will have blacks and whites going to the same schools, period. And the county government of Prince Edward County, Virginia, said, no, we're not going to do it. And so they shut down all the schools. Now, what happened was some private academies were built, and those private academies educated the privileged, the white children. So the white children would go to the private academies, and the black children were left without school. Even some whites were left without going to, if they couldn't afford it, they couldn't go to the private academy. So that's a true story. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story, I mean, I know this private academy. It was called Prince Edward Academy. There's another one in Virginia called Huguenot Academy. Now, I was a consultant, a computer technology consultant for both of these school systems. Now, well, both these schools, private schools. And I've been inside them. Right? What was that?
Long after that problem.
Oh, yeah. Way long after. Yes, back in the 90s, I was a consultant for both of these. So I got a chance to see these academies, and I learned after being at these academies as a consultant that that's what happened. I didn't know at the time that I was a consultant that these academies were built and designed to be separate. Now, I think since then it's no longer separate by race, if you will. Right?
Good.
But the point I'm trying to make is that a lack of education can be profound, absolutely profound. And the inability that this man who called to advertise his remaining spool of wire for sale was unable to estimate how much wire was on there. Now, I've had spools of wire in my hand, and typically there'll be a label on it that says, you know, how many feet are supposed to be there when it's new. And I can look at the spool and I can estimate, well, based on the core diameter, based on the outside diameter, based on the number of turns. In my head, I can estimate whether it's 95% remaining, 50% remaining, and so forth. But this man was unable to do that, as I could tell from what he said on the radio. Well,
and I see a lack of ability to estimate also with my grades. I turned in final grades recently, and a number of people called up and said, you know, I have 75 average. That's a C+. Why are you giving me a D or an F? Well, look at the grades and just figure where would the average be. You could just kind of see, you know, after I do grades, I always check and make sure that seems logical so that my math is correct. And they have no ability to do that.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that children today of all ages are having a tougher time estimating. And I really believe this is true. It's so true that in order to be in my class, I would interview the students. And I would say there was and I've told the story on the air, there's a restaurant in our little town, one restaurant, the main restaurant. And I would say, well, how would you get from that restaurant to the high school? And these are high school juniors and seniors who were applying to be in my class. And many of them had a tough time describing, well, and here it is. It's you leave the restaurant parking lot, make a left out of the parking lot. Go to the first stop sign, turn right. Continue until you come to a T in the road, and you make a left. At that point, about a mile from there is the high school on the left. Another way of saying it is, and this is the country, so it's not like there are intersections, every 500 feet. It's not like that. There are very few turns, and you could use landmarks. You could say left out of the restaurant parking lot, continue to the stop sign. You'll see railroad tracks on the left. You make a right. You continue 11 miles till you come to the T, where you're forced to turn left or right. Make a left, and about a mile ahead on the left-hand side is the high school. Now, these are high school students. These are people who have, if they've ever been to a restaurant, they've been to that one. Because it's the only restaurant, really. So and it was in the big town, 500 people in the big town. And, where they were coming from had fewer than 500 people. So what I'm saying is, we have somehow taught our children not to be able to do the things that are necessary in life. And do you have a feel for why this is, Marty?
Well, I think it's partly the job of the educators and partly the job of the parents.
Okay.
I think both are falling through the cracks in a lot of circumstances. I think that the schools need to be doing a better job. My kids in kindergarten were taught where the buttons are on a calculator before they even knew any math. I don't think they should know there is a calculator until they master their timetables and such.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that what you did in elementary school? Didn't you learn your multiplication tables or your times tables?
I remember what we had was a record. And it would go 5 times 3, 6 times 8. Pretty fast. And you had to write the answers down fast, and if you didn't do it, you stayed after school, and the record went on. And now it's, where's the calculator?
Yeah.
Even for easy problems, like I've given some problems where it would enable you to add a couple of $1,000 together. Thousands, maybe add 1,000, 1,500, and 1,200, and they want a calculator. They add just simple things together. So it's dependence on electronics like that. And it's also, if somebody does poorly, in my town they do a test at the end of high school to figure out if you've mastered high school. They do it, I think, your junior year. So if you fail at your junior year, what they do is they give you a class to pass that test. That's all the class is. The whole next year, you'll be learning how to pass that test.
So that you can graduate.
Yeah, not necessarily how you can think better or critically think, but so that, it's even labeled regarding the test. So you're teaching to the test, and then you meet your statistics.
Wow. When we come back, we've got Jeff in Massachusetts. Jeff, if you could hold on, we'll put you on right after these few commercial announcements. We're talking about education. Marty Barrett's with us. I'm Vin Finelli. We'll be right back. Marty Barrett's with us, and we're talking about education. Jeff in Massachusetts, thank you so much for holding on during the commercial breaks and before that.
Oh, thank you, Vincent. I was listening to your guest and yourself, and I love education because you see, education is the foundation of our society, literally the foundation, because I'm 47 years old, and I even see this mindset at work. Worse than the academic degradation, you see a moral degradation of the youth. I see it with my own two eyes, and there's a mindset that if you come into work on time or early and you do the very best that you can, and you look clean cut, you speak English and so forth, guess what? You are literally castigated as a sucker. Literally, a chump, a sucker, a loser. You're castigated to the far right as a racist if you're white and a sellout if you're black or Spanish or any other ethnicity. And we are heading towards international communism. Marty, what do you think of that phenomenon? And have you seen that phenomenon?
I'm sorry, I got disconnected here, so I didn't get all of your message here.
Oh, okay. Simply put, when you see America and where it's heading towards, the moral degradation of the youth, even in the workplace, even in life and the way the youth think, here it is. If you come in clean cut, speak English, do the very best you can at work, even go above and beyond what you're supposed to do, because of the school system, the younger youth, you're castigated as a sucker, a chump. If you're black,
that's true.
If you're black, you're considered a sell. If you're black or Spanish, you're considered a sellout, and if you're white, you're considered a racist, part of the racist white establishment. And do you see America heading towards communism, where the producers are eliminated or they have to run, and the country turns into a third world country? I see that coming to America. What do you see? Well,
I don't see any of that, but I certainly see the problem with proper work ethics and that kind of thing that you really can't teach people. My students have all discovered that through their education, there's always an easy way out. There's always somebody that'll give them an extension, or, they can do something later or make up for it somehow. So they haven't learned that a deadline's a deadline. And
that's true.
the harder you work, the better you do. And I think it's because my parents' generation were tough on kids, so we ended up being pretty tough. And today's generation, we kind of swung the other way. We care about their feelings, and we're warm and fuzzy,
right.
and maybe we swung too far that way.
You are so right. Let me wrap it up with this. In Massachusetts, especially, because we are a hardcore Democrat state, it's so ingrained. Everything is a connection. Vote for the Democrats. Hold up a sign for the Democrats. Give money to the Democrats. Kiss their ring. Kiss their behind. You will move up in the world. If you do not, you are castigated to the bottom, no matter how high your education is. And it's drilled into the people. What do you think of that? And I'm going to go and I'll hear your answers off air.
Well, Jeff,
I think that's kind of a shame.
Yeah,
I like to see a variety of viewpoints.
Mm-hmm. Jeff has left us, and he's listening off the phone call. But Marty, I think the point that he's trying to make is kind of like what we were learning about in the union shops, like in Detroit, where one guy would be really working hard, and then, at lunch break, the guys would crowd around him. The new guy would be working really hard to show that he deserved that job, and the guys who'd been there a while would crowd around him and say, "Look, you know what? You're making us look bad. Knock it off. Knock it off. You're doing 100 widgets an hour, and we're doing 40, and you got to slow down because you're killing us. You're making us work too hard." I think that's the kind of thing that he was talking about.
And my daughter's even been, she's in a union, and she's had a similar kind of suggestion from other people. Slow down. You don't need to work so fast. But the hidden message is you might be making me look bad.
Yeah.
With my slow progression, So I think that's definitely true.
One of my college schoolmates, and you met this man back in the 70s. During the summers, he had a job, and he was driving a truck. And his first day driving the truck for this union, he was given a board with a nail in it. And the guy ahead of him said, on the ladder, said, "You're going to have a flat tire today. Here's the nail with the board, and make sure you have a flat tire." So Marty Barrett's with us, class. And, I was thinking during the break, Marty, that the students really are dependent on these electronic gadgets, calculators, cell phones, and they can do research. And that leads me to, if they can't do it on their own, how many of them are cheating their way through college? Do you see evidence of cheating?
Sure. All kinds of different ways. Cell phones in the lab. The latest thing is the Apple Watch. Just skim through the notes. They must have awfully good vision, but they can skim through things online and get answers. I've found many that way. And when you catch some of these students cheating, most people, you would think they would be mortified. But I've seen many that just kind of like, well, I tried.
I tried what? I tried to cheat. I tried to cheat, or I tried to do well without cheating.
No, I tried to cheat, and I guess it didn't work. Oh, well, I tried,
So how does that, okay, Marty, we're talking about you're preparing students to be nurses. We're talking about people who are maybe the first person a patient sees in the emergency room who's suffering a heart attack. We're talking about nurses who are in the operating room. I tried. Wow.
And they want a word bank. A bank of words to use for these questions. To my understanding, there's no word bank in life. Can you imagine that person not being able to come up with anything because there's no choices? Heart attack wasn't a choice that they could pick as a diagnosis. So it really kind of scares you.
So how mechanically are these students cheating? So they have a watch, an Apple Watch. They have a cell phone. So they're sitting in your class taking an exam on the material that you've already taught. So let me see if I've got this right. You tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them. Then you tell them what you've told them. You give them homework to reinforce that. Is that right? Am I right so far? Okay. And then at some point you ask them to complete an examination that can prove to you that not only did they hear that you told them what you're going to tell them, you told them, then you told them what that you told them, and now all you want them to do is prove it. That they've sat through that, they've listened to you, they've done their homework, and they understand. That's all you're asking them, right?
Right. And then I throw in some critical thinking, so it's not just rote memorization. And that's where you can really separate the students on their abilities. You know, if I say this certain hormone does this, and then I say if you increase the effectiveness of that hormone, what would happen? Or if you inhibit the action of the hormone, what would happen? And the majority can't tell me.
Now, help me understand. Am I right in thinking that that would be a real-life situation?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the increasing or the decreasing of that hormone?
Sure.
Okay. Now, is this something that they have to figure out on their own, or is this something that you've already talked about? Is this something that's been in their homework? Is this something that's been part of their assignments where they would learn the answer to that?
No. They know the function of that hormone. And then I say if you have more or less, what would happen? They should be able to figure that out.
Meaning like increase the heart rate, decrease the heart rate? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, stuff like that. Sure.
Wow.
That's what's going to save somebody's life. Finding that little glitch. You know, something's amiss. And often the doctors miss things. The nurse, like you said, is the front line. They've got to catch these mistakes and see what's happening. And they need to take that extra step, that critical thinking step, to show they really understand.
I think the proof in what you're saying, Marty, is what one of our students is learning. One of our students is looking for a job. And she and I were talking. She's in her 30s. And what she is facing is before she can really get to talk to a person, she fills out these online tests. And I believe test after test. So first level of test, great. Now I get to talk to a person? No. Now you take the next level test. And I think after maybe the second or third level of online at your home test to apply for a job with a major corporation in the United States. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the finance industry. I'm talking about the insurance industry, those kinds of organizations, companies. In order to get a job, in order to get an interview with a real person, the way it used to be, the way you were interviewed and I was interviewed, before that, you have to go online and pass a series of tests that weeds out those who can't pass the test to save the time of the people who are doing the interviewing. Now, the reason I believe this is because there are so few who can actually make it to the point where it's worth an interview for the company. Now, I believe that's the proof. Does that jive with what you see, what you're seeing?
Yeah, and I think also it's kind of frustrating. Your first submission online. You know, you fill out the first form, you send it off. Often you don't really know if, I've heard from students that they don't really know if it's received or looked at, or it just kind of goes off. And it's kind of frustrating for them to not know whether they're being considered or, you know, their application is in the trash can. They don't know. So it's a little frustrating, I think.
And I agree with the students.
That he wanted to be a tech in the ER. He had all the classifications, sent in his interview, nothing happened when he sent in the application. He went to the Human Resources Department and said, when can I have an interview? Today? Now? And just kind of in your type of format, he got an interview, and he's a very personable person, very bright, got the job. But he had to push his way in to get an interview.
Well, maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want people who are assertive. Maybe they want people who are a little bit aggressive. Maybe it's the company is relying on these algorithms to determine who gets the interview, and maybe the Human Research Department is resting on their laurels, not paying attention to what's really happening. So maybe they're a union shop, and they they don't want to work too hard. I mean, I don't know, but I do understand that frustration that you're talking about from the student's perspective. I understand it very well. Yeah, just try. if you have a warranty issue about a product that has failed, and you try to call them, if you actually can get through to them, they'll say, "Oh, we have to submit that online." And then you submit it online, and you get a response that says, "Thank you for your concern," and it goes into the ether somewhere, and you don't hear back. You're absolutely right, and your students are. And I don't know the answer to this from where I sit. I mean, if I were at the corporate level, I would change it. I would have discussions with the candidates to see what really is coming in the door. There's
one local university which has kind of a neat policy, which I wouldn't know how to interpret it. But they do group interviews for people to transfer into their university. So they have maybe 6 students there and one interviewer, and it might be kind of difficult to decide whether you should be more chatty or hold back or how you get into the mix. But I think it's kind of interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, I've been part of the opposite of that. I've been interviewed by a whole team of people, and it was a whole conference room of people, and it was a government job, and they invited me in. I said, I don't think I want to do this, and they kept pushing me to go to this interview, and finally I said, okay, all right, I'll come to the interview. I was not interested in running this computer network that they had, but I showed up at the interview, and then they asked me to come into this meeting room, and they had these recording devices, and they had a lot of people sitting around this conference table, and they're all looking at me. And I did the unthinkable, the unspeakable. I committed a huge sin. I said, I really want to save you all a lot of time. How much does this job pay?
It wasn't enough, right?
and they told me, and I said, I can't do it for that. But I appreciate you guys inviting me over. Thank you very much. They said, well, we might be able to increase a little bit. I said, well, how much? And I said, no, I still can't do it. But thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I left. But that true story. But I didn't want the job to begin with, so I was willing to have a little bit of fun with this. And they're
still talking about you.
I haven't changed too much, have I?
This guy came in and came right out and asked what we make.
Yeah, question number one. Yeah. Well, in terms of sitting in a group interview, I think that, as you said, I think it's an interesting concept, and I have employed that technique when I've hired people to work in my team. What I would do is a little bit different. What I would do is I'd read the resumes, of course, and the experience profiles and the vitae, and I would decide who would be a candidate, who actually put enough effort into those pieces of paper that they wanted me to read about them, who put enough effort in and showed enough initiative and enthusiasm that we should consider spending time in person. Then I would interview them in person. I'd whittle it down to 3 candidates or so, and then I would take those candidates one at a time to lunch with the rest of my team. So we would all go to an informal lunch, sandwiches at the local restaurant, nothing expensive, and we'd let the candidate order whatever he or she wanted, and we would look at their values, and all of my team would watch and decide whether they liked that person and thought that person would work well with our team. And getting along is a big part of that equation. So, the skills, that's part. But getting along is also a big part. And then I would let my team pick which one they wanted. And it always worked out. So that was my approach. Marty Barrett, and I'll be right back. Marty Barrett's with us. Marty, as I was listening to the commercial announcements that just played, I was thinking back to the 1990s, early 1990s. In 1993, I was on the NBC Today Show, and it was a feature about computer networks in very economically disadvantaged rural Virginia, where I lived. And what they really didn't talk about was, they showed some of the things that we did, but they didn't say, what this district did was they built a remediation program. And literally what it was a fun way for kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, fourth graders to learn the things that they should have learned before, the things that they missed. It was remediation. Now, we're suffering the consequences of this right now. So firsthand, I had the experience of seeing the students learning for the first time things that they should have learned before. And we made it fun and exciting for them. I have students in college
that probably should be back in third grade.
That's what I'm talking about, Marty. Seriously. I'm talking about they missed it. And
I bet you I could take my students and correctly guess which ones had been read to as children by their parents.
Yeah.
I see a big influence in that. People with single parents and that come from not typical homes as we think of, I think they're behind, and the parents don't push. If my child were doing poorly, I would be going to the school saying, what can we do to fix this?
Absolutely.
Instead, they just keep going by and keep shuffling along to the next grade, and then now they're in college and they're in third grade level performing.
I've never met your father, and I regret not having that opportunity, nor your mother. But I have a feeling that if your parents were faced with a situation where they thought that you weren't learning, they would probably start out with meeting with the school system. What are we going to do to fix this? And then the next meeting would be, we're going to fix it. If you can't fix it, we're going to fix it without you. You'll be removed from your jobs.
One of my children had trouble reading. And what I did is I learned a method of teaching reading to adults that couldn't read. Now, my daughter was 6, but I learned this program that you're supposed to only use on adults to teach them to read, and I got a couple other kids that were also having trouble just to kind of make it almost like a little class. And this summer I ran this whole program, and my daughter is a very happy reader now. Many years later, loves to read. And I feel like if I would have let that go by, I don't know what would have happened. Not patting myself on the back, but kind of.
Well, no, that's what parents are supposed to do. Parents are supposed to ferret out where the problems are and help fix them.
Right.
We found out that the public training camp wasn't doing its job for us in Virginia, and so we took our children out of the public training camp and educated them ourselves. That's what we did. And it's possible. It absolutely is. And let me share this with those who are thinking, how do I do that? Well, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you either had to have one of three, meet one of three qualifications. Either a religious exemption, saying, I don't want my children learning what you're teaching. We have a religious problem with that. 2, you'd have a curriculum that the school would approve of. Or 3, you had a master's degree, I believe, in teaching or in some kind of field. And we met 2 of those criteria, the master's degree and and they said, what's the curriculum? I said, we're going to do the same thing you guys are doing, except we're going to enhance it.
Only better, right?
Yeah. And we said, and we'd like to borrow your books. And they said, you can't borrow our books. You got to get your own, buy your own. We said, okay. They said, but we would like your children to test for the Iowa test because they seem to do really well. They get 99s. We'd sure like to have that. And I said, no books. You don't get any 99s from us.
Yeah. They want your kids to help boost the average.
Yeah. Marty, thank you so much for spending time with us. It's always delightful chatting with you. Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
I did too. Marty Barrett, educator, college instructor, the hard sciences. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. This hour, Katie Singer's with us. Katie Singer, Singer. Her book, An Electronic Silent Spring, Facing the Dangers and Creating Safe Limits. Her website, electronicsilentspring.com. electronicsilentspring.com. Welcome, Katie.
Hello, Vincent.
It's great to be broadcasting with you, Katie. It's, you bring so much information to our broadcast classroom, and today we're going to be talking about the Internet of Things, 5G, and the dangers, and also something that many people may not be thinking about, and that is, how big is this Internet? How much of our resources does the Internet consume? And I remember back in the 1970s being in school and learning about there's going to be a paperless society. At some point, there'll be no paper. Everything will be electronic. It'll be on screens. It was hard to believe the Internet was not available to us at that time. You know, there were telecommunications protocols and capabilities, but nothing like we have right now. Would you like to share with us your thoughts on, well, the demands of natural resources by the Internet?
I'll tell you something. Sit with this. So, since those 1970s, when you were hearing about a paperless society, the Internet is the largest thing that humanity has built. Yes?
Oh yeah, and right up there with it, one of the most complex things also is the electric power grid. So, and they go hand in hand.
Okay.
But yes.
So let's. Here's where I go. So if the Internet is the largest thing that humanity has built, it requires massive amounts of electricity, although that's invisible to us because most people don't see anything special on their own electric bill. But I'm going to explain some of that, how it demands massive amounts of fuel, electricity. And then it demands water, conflict minerals, and it generates, on average, per Westerner, 66 pounds of electronic waste per year. So all of that is invisible to us. And as long as it's invisible, we can't do anything. We're just making assumptions that this stuff is ecologically sound. And that's not true. The semiconductor industry did a report in 2016 explaining that by 2040, we will not be producing enough energy globally to support computers. That is staggering. That's, 22 years away. And so we need to start we need to start getting informed about the energy and the other natural resources that the Internet demands, and then I think making choices so that we live within our true means so that we can keep this thing going a little bit longer.
I've got a comment for you.
You've got a what?
I've got a comment. I'm sitting here in the studio, right in our farmhouse in Missouri, and I have several computers up and running and several screens and some associated peripheral equipment to broadcast. And I have some French glass doors. And it was kind of cold this morning. It was 7 degrees. The house was a little chilly. We heat with wood. And Mrs. Finelli came into the studio and she said, "It's warmer in here." And she's absolutely right. Why? Because the computers were powered up an hour before the broadcast. So the excess heat, I don't waste that heat. I use that heat to heat the studio in the winter. In the summertime, I divert that heat. I've got the computers in a cubby, if you will, and I take the heat and I dump it outside. Now, I waste the heat in the summer, but in the wintertime, I use the heat from the computers to heat the studio, literally. So you're absolutely right about how much energy we're using.
Yeah. All right. Here's what I want to go to a different station in terms of where the electricity is coming from. So one question that really staggered me, what's the difference between turning on a light and downloading a video? So if you turn on a light, that requires powering, you need some source of electricity. You need power lines that deliver the electricity to your house or, the building you're in. You need wiring to the outlets within the building. You need a switch and a light bulb. Turning on a light does not require dozens of lights getting turned on somewhere else. However, if you watch a video, if you download a video, that requires powering up a vast network of computers and infrastructure all over the country, maybe all over the world. So when you watch a video, it's hard to describe all the things that are involved, but we've got a mine for coal, natural gas, petroleum, lead, tin, and conflict minerals. And those would go into every computer that would be in the chain. Then we need factories that produce the semiconductors, which are the building blocks of computers. Every computer takes hundreds of chemicals just kind of to keep the semiconductors clean, other things that I don't understand. Then we need factories that assemble and box each device, international shipping to deliver, your phone or your tablet or your computer to you. We need electricity to charge the device. And then we need hundreds of thousands of base stations. Those are cellular antennas in order to access the video, which is being stored at a data center, or possibly, hundreds of data centers. And then each of those data centers requires cooling systems so that the computers keep cool. Every station in this sequence requires electricity. And then if you're going to download the video wirelessly, that takes more energy than having a wired connection, like through fiber optics or copper line broadband access. So I'm just beginning to describe the difference, say, between turning on a light and downloading a video. Downloading a video is one of the worst things you can do energy-wise. Here's another way of understanding it for me. If you send a text, that's limited data. If you send voice, you're engaging more data. If you send a photo, that needs more data, like those little pixels. If you've got a video, that really increases the amount of data. Each time whenever you require more data, you also require more energy. So watching a video wirelessly is, again, one of the worst things you can do. I'm speeding here, but what do you say, Vincent?
When I was thinking of, I was listening to what you were saying, and I was thinking about how complex it is, and you're absolutely right. And I wrote down 4 words. I wrote down propeller, turbine, and diesel engine. And so you're talking about downloading a video, which would be absolutely impossible to do in today's environment without either a propeller, a turbine, or a diesel engine. And what I mean is the products mostly come from China. We can't do any of this downloading a video without products from China today. So we need a propeller on an airplane, or we need a turbine on an airplane, or we need a diesel engine to propel either a truck or a train locomotive.
I'm not following, because we need data centers and cell towers.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And that was the business that I was in. I used to build data centers, not cell towers, but I've built microwave transmitters. I've done that. And you're absolutely right. And they all take energy, and more and more and more. And one of the things about cell towers, Katie Singer, is that people are saying, well, there's so much electromagnetic radiation, we got to cut it down. Well, here's what the engineers are saying. The engineers are saying, well, yeah, because the distance is so great between these cell towers, and we have to ramp up the transmission signals to go farther, the solution is more cell towers. Put them closer together. That's their solution.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about engineering needs that are not recognizing the needs of living creatures, biological creatures.
Correct.
We're just designing this whole internet thing without recognition that the resources it requires are finite, and the way that it works by emitting radiation also affects living creatures. But all we're talking about today, we're going to try just to talk about the energy required. Here's another thing that just blew me away. Starting in 2013, manufacturers began making more transistors, silicon chips, than farmers grow grains of wheat or rice. So that's a major seismic shift in our whole orientation on planet Earth. We are now making more transistors than food.
And are those transistors embedded in silicon chips or integrated circuits? Are they biodegradable? And the answer is, I don't think so.
They're not biodegradable.
So. Yeah. So what's happening to all these? I think they're going in the trash for the most part.
Yeah, China, India, and Africa get our waste.
Well, I see Katie Singer's with us. Her book, An Electronic Silent Spring. Website, electronicsilentspring.com. Katie, there are about 7 billion people on the planet. There's a company called Gartner. It's a tech research company. They estimate that there are about 1.9 billion cell phones that were bought in 2015. That's 1 for every 4 people alive on the planet. There's an enormous amount of waste, technological waste, as a result of just the cell phones. And they've got lead, mercury, cadmium, and then there's a lot of other materials like copper and silver and gold in these electronic devices. And how long do they last? A few years. So you're absolutely right. This is a huge problem. This is a global problem. And you mentioned that...
You're talking about electronic waste now. And that's, it's totally part of it. Most waste goes to China and India and Africa. We're not keeping it here. We're not looking at it. And then children will comb it for a little piece of copper wire that they can sell so they can get an education, but exposure to all of the chemicals and the battery acids and all that stuff is not good for their health. It's not pretty what's happening. The other thing, though, I really want to share with people what the main energy hogs are with the Internet, because I had no idea about what I'm about to share, and I'm so grateful that I've got this chance, Vincent, that you're giving me this chance to share it with your listeners. So there are 3 main energy hogs. One is embodied energy, and I'll explain what that is. The second is data centers, and the third is access network. Embodied energy is the energy that goes into manufacturing a cell phone or a pad or a computer or an iWatch or whatever it is. So first, the raw materials have to be mined for, and then they have to be shipped to a factory. The factory has to be created, and then robots have to be created to do the assembly line thing so that you can get your end product, and then it has to get shipped to you. All of that energy that goes into that is called embodied energy, and it is greater than the amount of energy that your smartphone or whatever it is will use in its lifespan. Then data centers, that's where we're storing all the videos and the medical records, the educational records, the GPS navigation systems. All of that stuff has to be stored somewhere, and it gets stored in these things called data centers. Some of them are large enough that you can see them from outer space. They require, thousands of computers, and those computers require air conditioning. So then we need yet more devices, air conditioners, and water, or, could be a swamp cooler system, still needing a lot of water to keep the data center cool. There are some reports that if data centers were a country, they would rank 5th in use of energy on planet Earth. And then the access networks. Those are the base stations, the infrastructure that allows us to connect to a data center. And all of that stuff also requires embodied energy. And, we're surrounded by it. Again, we're not noticing it. So those are the 3 things: embodied energy, data centers, and access networks that really take natural resources in order to keep this internet thing going. One of the interesting things that I learned is called the Jevons paradox. I'll tell you about that after the break, I guess.
Yeah. Katie Singer's with us. And class, what you're hearing is information that is shocking, absolutely shocking. We take the internet for granted, and now you're learning the backstory. We'll be right back. Well, that's just very quick anecdotal evidence in 10 seconds. Katie was talking about embodied energy. Well, if you look at your home, what does it contain? Well, steel, stainless steel, aluminum, copper, timber, plastic, concrete, masonry, glass, fabric, plaster, stone, ceramics, and much more. Just a thought. If you want to know what embodied energy is, that is a simple description. Katie, back to you.
So we were talking about the Jevons paradox before the break. William Jevons was an economist, and he was around in UK at the time of the Industrial Revolution, and he noticed that as these coal-powered trains and mill workers were, looming cloth in mass quantities, which had never been done before, and then making clothing in mass quantities, which had never been done before. And all the investors were saying, this is fantastic. This is energy efficiency. You can get a shirt for so much cheaper than it would take you to loom the cloth and make the thing yourself. And he realized that energy efficiency is actually the cause of increased energy demand. Because as you mass produce anything, you've got to mine more, like in the case of cloth. So you've got to harvest more, you've got to grow more cotton before you harvest it and ship it to the factory, and then get more workers to loom the cloth and make the shirts. And if you're doing that with cell phones or iPads or desktop computers, they might be more and more energy efficient. That lowers the cost, which makes them affordable to more people, which means that more and more people are going to buy them. And so energy efficiency is actually the cause of increased energy demand. This is really sobering. So if we look to, what's going on now with the Internet, what's going on now is that the industry is gearing up for 5G, 5th generation of mobile infrastructure and mobile devices. It will support what's called the Internet of Things. That's machine-to-machine communication. So right now you can buy diapers that have chips in them, and they will send a message to your smartphone letting you know that your baby's diaper needs changing. You can buy orange juice that has a chip that will send a message to your refrigerator, which will send a message to your smartphone, so when you're at the grocery store, you know to get more orange juice. These are Internet of Things communication systems, and they take energy. Because you're transmitting data. But bigger systems, of course, are also involved. So our entire transportation system is now based in the cloud. Insurance, health insurance, everything, farming with precision agriculture where tractors can, in real time, access the Internet to find out weather patterns and soil moisture content and mineral content to determine exactly the kind of seed and pesticide and herbicide that, your parcel of land needs. All of that is based in the cloud. I could go on and on and on. We're basing everything in the cloud. And in order to have enough highway, call it, for all of that traffic, we need, the industry says, we need small cells. These are small cell antennas. They call them small cell antennas. And they're primarily being deployed on public right-of-ways, lampposts, and traffic lights. And you need to check your municipality's legislative agenda to see if your town and your state have already passed legislation allowing these 5G antennas in your neighborhood. I'm kind of on a roll here, but I'm reading that we can expect these antennas every 3 to 10 households. And no neighborhood notification will be allowed in all the cases that I read about. These are millimeter wave emissions. So probably we're going to start out at about, like 3.5 gigahertz, maybe 4.5 gigahertz. The FCC has allowed us to go to rent spectrum up to 100 gigahertz. And with these teeny tiny waves, we can hold more data. But we're also going to need a lot more antennas deployed everywhere. And it's untested. I've just said a mouthful.
You have, and it's absolutely frightening. And I know what you're saying is true because I've talked to one of our engineer instructors who was telling me about more and more smaller cells. And I was thinking about every 3 to 10 households. So if you want to, and cities are deploying this on the light poles right now, so that smart cities. And people are thinking, this is great because I'll have internet everywhere. What they don't realize, and if you just look at the privacy issue of this, forget the electrical power consumption, the privacy issue, they'll be able to figure out where you are for sure just on that little cell, that you're within that little cell. They'll know where you are within a few hundred feet just from that. Add to that facial recognition and all the rest of it. It's absolutely terrifying. I'd like to share
a little conversation. Let me clarify. So everything you're talking about, like facial recognition, everything requires energy. And the simple thing is it ain't sustainable. Like all of these conveniences or whatever we want to call them, every single transaction requires energy. And then there's the embodied energy, there's the data storage, there's the access network. And we're not even noticing that we've created this thing that, requires resources that are finite. Like, you can't regenerate, you can't keep making more fuel, or it gets harder and harder to extract these resources. And I don't think, I look at the solar power system and wind turbine systems. All of those arrays also require embodied energy. And I'm not reading that of a solar array that could power all of the, all of the embodied energy, all of the data centers, all of the access networks that make up the Internet, which is growing exponentially. So basically what this means is, once we're aware that this is what's going on, okay, what do we do? Because none of us wants to leave our children and grandchildren with, a way of operating that is just headed for collapse and doom. So we need to start now to reducing our footprint. And that's the juicy question that I hope every household begins to ask. I certainly have ideas about what we can do to start reducing things, but whoa, do we need every single person on the planet to step up to the plate and participate in this discussion or what? I can share some of the things that have come to me, starting with finding out about what's going on with small cells and deployment of cellular antennas in your town and in your state. So is there legislation pending that will allow telecom corporations to install these things without neighborhood notification, without public hearings, and in most cases without rental fees paid to the owner of the public right-of-way? That would be the taxpayers. So the industry is writing this legislation that is allowing them to access public right-of-ways without a rental fee. And typically, those rental fees have paid for fire and police. So that's a concern. You need to find out what's going on legislatively in your town and in your state. And then one of my favorite protocols is to begin by turning the Wi-Fi off at your house for 12 hours at night while you sleep. And just get used to, living without Wi-Fi while you sleep. So that's a start, and you can see if that will affect your sleep, if it'll improve it, if, I don't know, maybe people's digestion will improve, or, maybe you'll be really edgy not to have Internet access while you're sleeping. But that's a free trick you can try. Then you don't want to buy in to smart technologies. Like, don't buy smart appliances, smart phones, and Internet of Things devices. These are all things that are connected to the Internet of Things, and they say they're more energy efficient, but because they're going to be communicating in this whole Internet of Things system, I don't know. I really question whether they're saving energy or not. And just by buying a new appliance, that means you're discarding another appliance. Where's it going to go? Every time we upgrade, there's embodied energy involved, there's electronic waste involved. So you really want to watch your upgrades.
Class, in case you're thinking that there's going to be some disagreement from me, absolutely not. I've got a comment when we come back about what Katie just said about Wi-Fi, turning it off at night. Katie Singer, an electronic silent spring. Katie Singer's with us. Let me give you the website, electronicsilentspring.com. electronicsilentspring.com. And you can get her book at Amazon, Electronic Silent Spring. Katie Singer, Singer, Katie, Singer. Katie, now you're talking about Wi-Fi and shutting it off at night. I was at a house where the communications company installed the Wi-Fi system, the router. They put it in the attic because it was convenient for them. It's convenient for the communications company, which meant that it was really not accessible to the homeowner. If the homeowner wanted to do any physical work on the router, they'd have to climb up get on a ladder and climb through a hole, through a door, and go into this little area of the attic and then work on the router. Well, to make sure it was convenient to power it off at night, exactly what you were saying, we just added extended a circuit, put a light switch on the wall, and ran some wire up to a duplex outlet that was controlled by the light switch. So the router could be powered on and off from the light switch on the wall downstairs, which avoided using the ladder. So that was our solution to exactly what you're talking about. So for those who say, I can't do it because the router's in the attic, there's the answer. And you're absolutely right. They want that The people in that house want that router off whenever they want to turn it off, which is always at night. Good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
One of the things on my website that I love telling people about is the paper called Calming Behavior in Children with Autism and ADHD. And I feature the work of a pediatrician in the Bay Area who's had tons of families come to her with children with autism. And she came up with this protocol. Number 1, turn the Wi-Fi off for at least 12 hours at night. Number 2, turn the electricity off to the child's room while he or she is sleeping. Do it at the breaker box if you can do that safely. But you don't just want things turned off. You want them unplugged in your bedroom. You also want to be sure that, like, we have a very small house, and so the refrigerator and the stove are on the other side of our bed. And we unplug the refrigerator every night, and I haven't lost any food yet. I just put ice bottles into the refrigerator part, and, I put fresh ice bottles in every night. I take those little juice bottles, and I freeze them during the day, and then I put them in the refrigerator at night. So there are lots of tricks you can do, and in this paper, Calming Behavior in Children with Autism and ADHD, we have case studies of families whose children improved their behavior, sleep, and digestion. So did other family members. And the punchline is this also begins to reduce energy. And I think it really helps us to think in terms of these questions, like, what am I not noticing here? What's the embodied energy in all of this stuff that I'm using? And do I need it on all the time? What can I do to decrease my footprint? And then maybe it'll also affect your family's health. And, you can track it. Another great trick is to program your phone so that you check messages only every 2 hours. So turn your phone off, keep it off, and then there's some program, it's kind of like an alarm, and it'll just ring you every 2 hours and say, time to check for messages, and then you're not getting zapped 24/7. You're only getting zapped when it's time to, make calls and receive calls. And you can program your phone so that it's off most of the time. It might improve your life. You might have other things going on besides constantly checking your phone.
Katie, very quickly, do you have a cell phone?
I've never had one.
Yeah, I knew that.